3 years, over 1,000 kilometers of front line, nearly 1 million Russian casualties, and Russia is still coming. Ukraine is bleeding soldiers, running low on weapons, and fighting a war that the world's attention span has already moved past. So the question everyone is afraid to answer out loud is, how much longer can Ukraine actually hold on? Today, we're going deep. The cold numbers, the drone revolution, the robot army, and the one thing that might save Ukraine when everything else runs out. Let's start with the most brutal problem Ukraine faces, and it has nothing to do with Western missiles or Russian firepower. Ukraine is running out of men. After nearly 4 years of grinding, exhausting combat, the Ukrainian military is hemorrhaging infantry. Frontline units are now operating at as low as 30% of their intended strength. In some of the most contested sectors, like the fight for Pokrovsk in eastern Donetsk, President Zelensky himself has confirmed that Ukrainian soldiers are outnumbered 8-1 by Russian forces. Overall, across the entire front, the ratio sits at roughly 3 Ukrainian soldiers for every 10 Russians. That is not a battle. That is a slow siege. Here's how bad the desertion and AWOL numbers are. Ukrainian prosecutors have opened hundreds of thousands of cases linked to soldiers going absent without leave since 2022. More than half of those cases happened in 2025 alone. Some frontline brigades are so depleted that commanders are actually welcoming deserters back just to fill the trenches. Ukraine tried to fix this. In 2025, Kyiv lowered the conscription age, introduced digital registration, fixed-term contracts, and bigger financial bonuses. But there's a deep contradiction at the heart of the mobilization effort. An August 2025 decree allowed men aged 18 to 22 to legally leave the country until their 23rd birthday. And what happened? Germany, already hosting over 1.2 million Ukrainian refugees, reported a spike in young male arrivals almost immediately. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz had to publicly ask Kyiv to keep its youth in Ukraine. The numbers tell the story. Ukraine needs roughly 300,000 new recruits to restore combat power. It has managed to bring in about 200,000 since early 2025. Monthly recruitment runs between 17,000 and 24,000 soldiers. Russia, by contrast, is signing 50,000 to 60,000 new recruits every single month, fueled by cash bonuses exceeding 1 million rubles, housing subsidies, and yes, the mass incorporation of prison inmates. And while Russia's total casualties have reached an estimated 1 million killed and wounded since 2022, the Kremlin keeps refilling the pipeline. Ukraine cannot match that math, not even close. If this trend continues into late 2026, military analysts warn that Russia's numerical advantage could reach a tipping point, one that enables decisive breakthroughs along the front. This, insiders say, is exactly what Putin is counting on. It mirrors Russia's historical playbook, win through sheer, suffocating numbers in a war of attrition.
But here's where the story flips. Because Ukraine is doing something that no military in history has done at this scale. It is replacing human beings with machines. First, the drones. Ukraine produced roughly 4 million drones in 2025 alone. And they're not just buzzing around the front lines. Ukraine has built a long-range drone campaign that is reaching deep inside Russian territory, hitting targets that were thought untouchable. Take the Engels 2 airbase in Russia's Saratov Oblast, 600 kilometers from the front lines, home to Russia's nuclear-capable Tu-95 and Tu-160 strategic bombers, the very planes used to rain cruise missiles on Ukrainian cities. Ukraine has hit it repeatedly. In January 2025, drones destroyed the Crystal fuel depot supplying the base, knocking out 4 petroleum storage tanks and damaging 10 more. A March 2025 strike was described by British intelligence as Ukraine's most successful ammunition depot attack of the year. Satellite imagery confirmed extensive destruction of munition stockpiles that were actively being used to bomb Ukrainian civilians. In June 2025, a single night of coordinated strikes hit the Engels oil refinery, the Diaghilevo airbase in Ryazan Oblast, and the Progress missile manufacturing plant in Tambov. These are not minor skirmishes. These are strategic strikes on Russia's ability to make and launch the weapons it uses to kill Ukrainians. The Atlantic Council analyzed the broader drone campaign and concluded that Ukrainian strikes had disabled approximately 10% of Russia's total oil refining capacity in the first 2 months of 2025 alone. Ukraine's new domestically built FP2 heavy kamikaze drone, a platform that functions more like a cruise missile than a standard drone, carrying over 100 kilograms of explosives, has been used to target Shahed launch sites in Crimea, literally destroying Russia's drone launching infrastructure from the inside. But drones are just the beginning. The real revolution is on the ground. In late 2025, Ukraine made military history. A single unmanned ground vehicle, a robot, held a frontline position for 45 days straight, armed with a mounted machine gun, undergoing maintenance and reloading every 48 hours. No soldiers, just the machine. Robots do not bleed, said the Ukrainian officer who reported the mission. In 2025, Ukraine delivered 15,000 unmanned ground vehicles, UGVs, to frontline units, up from just 2,000 in 2024. Plans for 2026 exceed 20,000 units. Over 270 Ukrainian companies are now building ground robots. The Droid TW-12.7, a tracked combat robot armed with a Browning machine gun and AI-assisted target recognition, has been ambushing Russian vehicles in fog-covered terrain where aerial drones can't operate. One unit used a ground robot to destroy a Russian MT-LB armored transporter while the operator sat safely more than a kilometer away. Ukraine has also stood up what the BBC and defense analysts describe as the world's first dedicated UGV battalion inside the K2 brigade.
These machines carry Kalashnikov machine guns, grenade launchers, and battery-powered kamikaze payloads that roll silently toward enemy positions. Unlike aerial drones, they give zero acoustic warning before detonating. Ukrainian General Staff reports that robotic platforms have already reduced personnel casualties by up to 30%. In some zones near Pokrovsk, 90% of all frontline supplies are now delivered by ground robots because sending a human being or a truck would be a death sentence. Former Commander-in-Chief Zaluzhny has laid out the vision for what comes next. AI-powered swarms combining aerial, ground, and sea drones attacking from multiple directions and altitudes simultaneously. In the near future, we'll see dozens and even hundreds of smarter and cheaper drones attack from various directions and heights, from the air, ground, and sea at the same time, he said. Now let's look at Russia, because to understand how long Ukraine can hold, you also need to understand how long Russia can keep pushing. Russia's strengths are real and cannot be dismissed. It has a vastly larger population base, a military-industrial complex that has been restructured for war, and a state that can suppress domestic dissent while continuing to spend. Defense spending in 2025 reached an estimated 7 to 8% of GDP, roughly $198 billion, and Russian arms production, including glide bombs, drones, and missiles, has scaled significantly. Russia is also receiving drone components from China and technical support that Western sanctions haven't fully stopped. And crucially, Moscow is recruiting. Every single month, tens of thousands of new bodies headed to the front. But beneath that surface, the cracks are widening. Russia's economy is quietly breaking. After wartime growth of 4% in 2023 and 2024, GDP growth in 2025 slowed to around 1%, and analysts now expect it to hover near that same level or dip into recession in 2026. The IMF projects just 0.6% growth. The wartime spending spree has been exhausted. The Kremlin has already burned through most of its accessible cash reserves. Most of the liquid funds in Russia's National Wealth Fund have been consumed covering the 2024 and 2025 budget deficits. Sanctions, meanwhile, are biting harder than Russia admits. The EU lowered the oil price cap in July 2025 and introduced an automatic adjustment mechanism. Russian Urals crude is now selling at a discount of over $20 per barrel below the global benchmark. At current prices, below $40 per barrel, Russia's oil industry is in crisis. Roughly half of Russian oil companies were operating at a loss for most of 2025. Rosneft, Lukoil, and Gazprom Neft are all under pressure. The Kremlin has been forced to raise VAT from 20 to 22%, introduce new consumer taxes, and increase fees across the board just to keep the budget from collapsing. Ordinary Russians are now footing the bill for Putin's war.
And the war is coming home in other ways. Ukraine's drone campaign has triggered fuel shortages inside Russia. Crime rates are rising sharply among returning veterans.
Transparency International now ranks Russia 157th out of 182 countries on its Corruption Perceptions Index, equaling its worst ever score. The labor market is so tight, with 2.4 million workers expected to be missing by 2030, that Russia has turned to importing workers from India and Sri Lanka. Over 250,000 unemployed veterans have returned from the front and are struggling to reintegrate into society. Russia is not collapsing, but it is not winning easily either. Its advances have been grinding, slow, and extraordinarily costly. British intelligence estimated that Russia suffered 382,000 killed and wounded in 2025 alone. For all of Moscow's manpower advantage, it has not achieved a decisive breakthrough yet. So what does all of this add up to? Who wins a race to the bottom? The honest answer is that 2026 is Ukraine's most dangerous year since the full-scale invasion began. The financial gap for 2026 and 2027 combined sits at around $60 billion. Western military aid has dropped by approximately 43% since July 2025. The U.S. reauthorized the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative at just $400 million per year, a fraction of the tens of billions provided earlier in the war. Without fresh European funding, Zelensky has warned Ukraine will be forced to cut drone production, the one asymmetric advantage keeping Russia's numerical superiority in check. But Russia's position is not as strong as the Kremlin claims. It is not collapsing, but its economy is entering a prolonged, grinding stagnation. Its military is sustaining losses that, while sustainable in the short term, are generating real social consequences at home. Veterans are flooding back, families are grieving, crime is rising, money is getting tighter. If Ukraine receives consistent funding from Europe, maintains its drone campaign, and scales its robot army successfully, it can remain in this fight for years. The Ukrainian military has demonstrated extraordinary innovation and adaptability. No army on Earth has more real combat experience with unmanned systems. The UGV battalions being stood up right now could genuinely offset the manpower disadvantage that is Ukraine's Achilles heel. If, on the other hand, European financial support stalls, drone production is cut, and the manpower crisis deepens without structural reform, Russia's patient, grinding approach could eventually wear down the front. Not in a dramatic collapse, but in a slow territorial erosion that reaches a tipping point. The bottom line? Ukraine can hold, but not indefinitely and not without help. Russia can press, but not cheaply and not without paying an accelerating domestic price. This is not a war that will end with one side's armies smashed and white flags raised. It will end, most likely, through economic exhaustion, political pressure, and negotiated reality. And right now, both sides are racing toward that moment, just from different directions. There is no clean answer to how long Ukraine can resist, but every drone that takes out a Russian refinery, every ground robot that holds a position without bleeding, every sanction that shaves another dollar off a barrel of Russian oil buys Ukraine time. And in this war, time is everything. If this breakdown helped you understand what's really happening on the ground, hit like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. This war isn't over, and we're not done covering it.